Hey. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome on in. Oh, so already seeing those numbers go up. Love to see that. Thanks for joining us today for this month's CMWS webinar, Mentoring Programs, What to Know Before You Grow. We'll get started in another minute or so just to give people some time to come on in, but feel free as you're joining to drop your name and location in the chat. Definitely want to get to know you all a little bit more today throughout today's webinar. And again, we'll give folks a little bit of time to get settled in. We were just talking about our go-to karaoke songs, so feel free to drop in your go-to karaoke song in the chat as well as your name and your location. If you so desire, maybe we can get some recommendations. Oh, already perfect, Eli, Into the Groove. That's such a good one. I love that. I actually played that at the start of a webinar I did a few weeks ago. That song, that's a great one. Awesome. For folks who are just joining in, welcome to today's webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is where you are. We're here to talk about mentoring programs, what to know before you grow. We'll give folks another minute or so to join on it. But awesome, Anthony Jones, Florida. Here we go. Baltimore, that's where I am. You're like, great, awesome. Uh, Kevin from Southern Indiana, Marissa from Philadelphia. Awesome. Here we go. We got New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado. Thank you for adding your songs in. That's amazing. Jay-Z, we got Queen, a couple more classics. That's great. Awesome. This question. Anything from The Greatest Showman. No one wants me doing karaoke. Jen, I think I encourage you to do karaoke. I think everyone wants you to do karaoke. Awesome. Emily from Boston. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Sandy from Seattle. Awesome. For folks who are just joining in, thanks for being here. We're here today to talk about what to know before you grow for your mentoring programs. My name is Jake Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the training delivery manager at Mentor National. And we can go on and get started. Thanks. And again, continue to drop in not just your name and location, but what your go-to karaoke song is in the chat. So 4 tips for engagement. You're already doing one of these things. A couple different ways to engage with us throughout the webinar today. You can use the chat box to introduce yourself, talk with one another, share resources, respond to the things that presenters are saying today. And then you can also use that Q&A box to ask any questions. We'll have some dedicated time at the end of the webinar for any questions that you have that you'd like to see answered. You can also use the upvote feature to boost up any other questions that you're seeing in there that you definitely like prioritize. This webinar is being prioritized, is being recorded. It will also be sent out with the slides, resources, and contact information of the panelists, so you don't have to worry about taking too extensive of notes. You'll have the slides and everything afterwards today to be able to review. Community practice. So this is actually a feature unique to this webinar series. It's actually led by Bianca, who's facilitating today's webinar, as well as Jeanette Simon of Mentor Maryland, DC. And the purpose of this community of practice is to co-create a space where participants can build relationships with one another, as well as share experiences with how they've implemented the learning from these webinars, both the last one that we had in January, as well as this one, and the one that we'll have in October as well. You can scan that QR code, but also you can click that link once we send these slides out. I'll also share the link in a little bit in the chat if you are interested in signing up and joining that call. I believe I don't know if I have a slide for it. Yeah, actually, I'll do that now. I actually have a couple polls, again, to get to know you all and the programs that you're working with a little bit more so that they can inform today's conversation. So let me pull those up. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing in the chat. Seeing more Texas representation, New Jersey. That's awesome. So in a moment, you'll see a poll launch on your screen around your first kind of team size. Think about your current organization, whatever organization or program that you are working with, that you're coming into today's webinar to learn a little bit more about supporting. And the question is, how many people are a part of your organization or program team's staff roughly? And so this includes part-time, full-time staff, volunteers, board members, etc. And I'll give you all another 30 seconds or so to answer that question. I'll close the poll out in another 5 seconds or so. So get your answers in if you haven't already. Awesome. Thank you for filling that out. And so I can share the results. I think that should pop up on your screen. As you can see, we actually have a pretty even, diverse representation of all different team sizes. It looks like most of us sway in the 1 to 5 team members range, but then the rest are all kind of evenly spread out. So that's really interesting. And I think will help to inform some of today's conversation. And again, no matter what type of program your experience, please share your comments and ideas and insights in the chat. All ideas are welcome here. So I have one more poll for you all, and that should be popping up in just another second. This one is around youth served. So again, roughly, how many youth does your program serve each year? And I'll give another 30 seconds or so to answer this one. I'll close it out in 5 more seconds. So if you haven't gotten your answer in, get your answer in. All right, perfect. Thank you all and sharing the results. So that should pop up on your screen. Again, that's pretty interesting. We have a pretty even split amongst everybody. It looks like maybe the most fall into that 10 to 50, 50 to 100 range. But again, it's interesting that both were such even splits. Usually we have one answer that kind of skews more, but awesome. Good to get to know everybody in the room a little bit more in that way. And now we can move on to talking a little bit about today's webinar. Just a very broad overview. These are some of the things that we'll be talking about. Board and volunteer mobilization, organizational communication and evaluation, smooth workflows and operations, and then some key things to center before you grow and scale your program or your organization. We'll have a couple different opportunities throughout to hear from you all as well, so please feel free to continue to use the chat to share your comments and ideas. But now, very excited to introduce Bianca, who will be facilitating today's webinar. Bianca is a mother, former educator, adjunct professor, and is a consultant with Mentor Mentor Virginia. And she's also the founder and executive director of Pretty Purposed, which is a school-based, school and community-based mentoring program supporting over 200 girls in Central Virginia. So I'll pass it over to you, Bianca.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jake, for that warm introduction. Really excited today to do this webinar just because I feel like I have some personal experience, but it's great just to be in a space with two great executive directors who I look at as colleagues in this space. So I'm happy to introduce them. So the first person that I want to introduce is David Krisafi. So David is the founder and executive director of Launch for Life, which is a group mentoring program for boys who are ages 12 to 16 years old, who need a positive male role model. David is also a licensed resident in counseling at Rubicon Counseling. David has a 20-year law enforcement background and 20 years as a youth mentor and coaching experience. David is also the father of two boys, ages 16 and 13. So we're so grateful to have David. And so the next person I want to introduce is Warren McCrickard. So Warren is the executive director of Boys to Men Mentoring Network of Virginia, which is a social emotional group mentoring for youth and young adults, providing a safe, consistent space for sharing feelings and gaining skills and self-accountability. Warren has a very diverse background and comes from for-profit sales and marketing, working in film, retail, recreational, marine, and mental health tech industries. Warren is a lover of music, plants, vinyl records, and in-person sporting events. And Warren is a dog dad to Lucy and Wrigley. So thank you so much for being with us today. So during our prior grassroots mentoring webinar, we discussed steps such as logic models, engaging a team around program design, So I figured that now would be a perfect time for us to map out some of those other foundational components that are critical when you're developing organizations or developing programs. So one thing I want to know is, what is a key process or tool that each of you use to kind of manage smooth workflows, but really mobilize your organization? Jake, you can go to the next slide.
What's going on? So my name is Warren, and I am jumping in. It's so nice to meet everybody. Thank you, Bianca, and thank you, Jake. And it's great to share this time with David as well. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was board development. A lot of times, as Boys to Men started, for our example, we had a program manager who was dealing with youth, and he didn't know really all the things and all the tools that he needed, but he knew he needed money, and he knew he needed to find money, and he knew he needed some organization because that wasn't his strength. And so for us, we kind of brought together anybody that was interested in Boys to Men, and we would sit around tables and talk to all kinds of people. Once we got to a place where we had grown big enough, we realized that there were these huge gaps that we had, where maybe we had, 4 guys who were all finance, but we had no one who maybe had some legal knowledge or marketing knowledge. And so it starts making the organization at times feel a little bit lopsided, or can become an echo chamber. So we actually used Mentor Virginia and the TA and the National Mentoring Association to do technical assistance, and actually used Bianca, so isn't that nice, to come and sit with us and to talk with us about our board. And so what we did is we laid out all of our board members. So if you are someone who doesn't have a board yet, then, and I know this is hard to see here, but we'll give you some resources, and I can always share this with anyone who wants it. But the idea is really to kind of go down and think about all the different aspects that you might need. Do you need someone who helps with finances? Do you need someone who understands marketing? Do you need someone who understands legal work? What are all the ways that you need support from someone on a board? And then thinking about demographics. Where do they live? How much do they make? Do they really have access and awareness of what your community is going through, or your service area is going through? Are they diverse in race? Are they diverse in gender? So all those things are kind of put into a board matrix, and you start looking at the qualities that people have that you want. Where are your gaps? You build a pipeline. So you start looking at, as an executive director, what I would do is I would think about, okay, I have a gap in marketing, and I have a gap for us, we had a predominantly white board. So how do we diversify from that? We had a primarily older male board as well. So those were places that we started looking at, who could we fill that pipeline for? And I'd say the biggest piece that is always a challenge is the expectations. So, there are a lot of people who will have a heart to do what you want, which is amazing. You have to have heart in an organization, as we all know. But also as the leaders and the leadership within a staff, it's really important to make sure that you've got some expectations for your board members. Have you thought about if they need to make sure that they're donating? Each one has to donate. Do you know how many years they're going to serve? Do you know all of those kind of expectations that are there? And putting all of that together before you go out and pursue someone to be on the board. And I put some feedback in here because we'd love to know what you're looking for in a board member, and where you're finding board candidates. I'll just quickly say we have an organization here based out of Virginia called Synapse, and that we leverage that really well for finding board members. And there's also a management group that works together to kind of cultivate board members. And so both of those, leadership of Metro Richmond, which allows us to lean in as well and find board members. So where are you finding them? And what are you looking for in a board member? And I'm going to pass it over to David.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. It was good to see that about 50% of the population here has less than 20 volunteers. We're a pretty new organization, about three years old, finishing up our third year this year, and we're in that same boat. So it's great to see that I'm a good company there. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was sort of how do you mobilize your volunteers without overwhelming. We're in a position, a fortunate position, but also unfortunate position that we have no employees in our organization. What does that mean? It means that we have to really mobilize them and get them motivated without the motivation of money. Which can be very, very difficult. The first thing that we found that is extremely important is to connect them to the mission. Even when you're recruiting, the recruitment of volunteers needs to come from telling a story, right? Telling your own story, telling a mentee's story, a positive story. But instead of going over the nuts and bolts of the organization and what we do, telling a story and getting them connected to the mission, right? Because that's going to be the foundation of why they're part of the organization and the amount of work they're going to do for the organization, how they're going to prioritize the organization. So connecting the mission to recruit them, but to keep them, to retain them. We encourage our board members to come to our events because that is how they continue to connect themselves to the people that they serve. So we serve boys 12 to 16 years old. So when the board members come to those events and see the boys and see the interactions with their mentors and are able to actually visualize what we're doing and what they're part of, it really reinvigorates them to get even more motivated. So connection to the mission is key. Setting expectations from the start. Warren mentioned this, and I'll mention this in this slide and then my next slide. Expectations are really, really important. Not just setting expectations of what you want, but talk about the expectations that they have, what they want to get out of the organization, what time they have to give the organization, so that you're working on a level playing field and you understand where they're coming from and they understand where you're coming from. Understanding their priorities. The unfortunate part of being a complete volunteer organization is that usually when you volunteer, that volunteerism is probably your first priority or your first thing to go. It's your last priority. So because life and work and everything else gets in the way. So understanding, talking to your volunteers, talking to your board members of what their priorities are in life, what they have going on in life, and being understanding of that, being compassionate and empathetic to their needs as volunteers, but then obviously relaying what your priorities are and what your needs are. And that dives into sort of being flexible, right? Sometimes those expectations are talked about, those priorities are talked about, but the expectations and priorities change, availability changes. And so what I've learned over the last 3 years is I have to be extremely flexible with my volunteers. I have to understand where they're coming from and what their needs are so that I can retain them, that I can keep them in my cadre of volunteers and tap into their resources. The last thing, and this goes, I'm a licensed therapist, so this goes into any relationship, but communication is key. Without communication, everything's going to fail. And so you have to continue to update, to provide support, to provide the information needed for your board, for your volunteers, for your mentors, whatever it is, you need to provide them that information. And oftentimes you need to provide it to them over and over and over again because they do have busy lives. And so sometimes one email is not going to do the trick, right? You have to continue to engage with them on a communication level.
No, this is so great, David. And I see people sounding off in the chat about board members looking for someone willing to do the work, speak in the community. I know I said I'm personally looking for people who are willing to engage different networks, I see people who know how to collaborate remotely, working board members, fundraisers. Nicole said, looking for males, younger, willing to actively promote the program, diversity in career fields. No, this is great. So I guess my next question is, with so many people involved, board members, volunteers, mentors, some of us have staff, how do you ensure that you have those smooth communications and workflows and keep all of the knowledge going throughout the organization? Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. So like I said, communication is key. And this is where I'm going to be repetitive, but you've got to communicate your expectations and you've got to listen to theirs as well. So you're on the same page, and you have an ability to understand where they're coming from. I also think using the right platform. Look, we're all in a virtual world right now. We all communicate on platforms. So what is the right platform for your organization without overwhelming your volunteers or employees, right? You don't want to add. Early on, we started adding things. Oh, we're gonna use Group Me, right? Well, now they have to download a new app, right? Now they have to check a new app. So you want to be careful not to add too much to your volunteers, because it can overwhelm them and they can get fatigued pretty quickly. So choosing the right platform for you. I put Google for nonprofits. We have gravitated towards Google platform, and you can get a free version through Google for nonprofits. You just have to apply for it. Yeah, you put your paperwork in, and you set it up. But we love Google platforms. We love the functionality of it, the way we can share things, and most people have functioned or do function in the Google environment. We tried Onboard, which is a paid service. I think we found that right now for us, we're too small to really utilize the functionality of it. This was for our board, but I think it just wasn't what we needed for right now. It can be, I think, a functional resource for you if you have the means for it, and if you have a larger board that's quite active. The last one that we use, and it's a free service, is Evite. This is how we communicate our events to our parents, so that they can respond and communicate within that platform. But what is the right platform for you? And really, a lot of that is research, one, and then trying it out. Sometimes it works, and it's okay to try something and then move off of it. But overall, you want to find the one that works for you and doesn't overwhelm your employees. Maintaining a healthy cadence. I made the mistake early on, the first year of running this organization, is thinking that everyone else thinks about this organization as much as I do, right? So when I had a thought, I would blast it out to a group. It didn't matter what thought I had. It was exciting to me, so therefore it's exciting to everybody else. Well, I quickly realized that overwhelms people, right? They have other lives. They don't need 10 texts from me a day on what's going on in my head. So I had to start to learn on what is a healthy cadence for my board. What is a healthy cadence for my volunteers? What's a healthy cadence for my mentors, right? Understanding what that cadence is. There's always going to be immediate needs, but that's something separate, and you can communicate that with them. Hey, sorry to bother you. I know it's in the evening. This is an emergency, though. I need information on this, right? But developing a healthy cadence for you and your volunteers is really important. Be clear with your needs and deadlines. Again, this goes back to proper communication, right? What do you need and what is the deadline? And understanding that, and that's basically setting that expectation for your volunteer that, hey, I expect this, and giving them as much detail as possible. And I'm going to be repetitive again, but being flexible. As an executive director, that's something I've had to learn very quickly, is I had to be flexible. Having worked in law enforcement for 20 years, that's not something that I'm used to doing, right? Is being flexible. So, changing that dynamic in my brain to go, okay, I have to be able to be malleable to what is needed and what's given to me, really. which oftentimes is free volunteering, people's time, and I have to respect that time, and I have to be flexible to that time.
No, thank you, David. Tom said, I am guilty of providing too much info and doing it too fast. I move at corporate speed, and these people do not do that. So it just looks like we can definitely relate to like brain dumping on people. So I think my next question is, with that whole brain dumping thing, we know that as program directors or program managers or executive directors, you can't do it all. So tell us a little bit about how you get those workflows going into a pace where you're not doing it all, that you don't have to constantly be on. How do you maintain or manage or even start the development of institutional knowledge?
Yeah, so first and foremost, institutional knowledge is important because you may not always be part of the organization, and so there needs to be that continuity, and that's the why, one of the reasons why it's so important. If me or Warren leave the organization or Bianca leave the organization, someone's got to pick up that slack, and they're not going to know what we know unless it's available to them. In addition, people have to have access to that knowledge when things happen. We had a situation where we were at an event and one of our mentees passed out, right? The volunteer needed access to the mentee's parent information in order to contact the parent. So we had to have a system where they can easily get that information, right? As opposed to, a call chain where it's going to take 10 to 20 minutes to try to find this parent's number. So access is important. Who has access to what? We have information about some of these kids that we don't. That is a need to know, right? So we don't need to have all of our volunteers have access to this personal information, but a select group of people. So it's important to understand who needs what. Having worked in law enforcement, I always worked in a need to know environment. So I really take that seriously. So it's a matter of determining who needs this information and who doesn't need this information. And then we could talk about what information needs to be there. You don't want to overwhelm with too much because it can become cumbersome and voluminous. So trying to be strategic on what information is needed for who, and what information is important if you don't continue in the organization, and somebody can easily pick up the slack and move forward with the organization, continue down the line with the mission. Where do you house the information? We're migrated to Google Suites, and a lot of our information is housed in that. It's easily shareable. People can go in and make changes and edits and add. It's easy for us. It's free for us. I'm sure there's other great platforms out there that work for you. But for right now, the size of our organization, that it's very manageable. It's very easy. It's user friendly. Most people know how to jump in to Google Suites and start using it immediately.
No, thank you. I think
Amanda,
you've
can
done
I
a
jump
good
in real
job.
quick?
Yeah, go ahead,
And
Warren.
just say, communication wise, one of the things that we found is the platform that people reach out, especially with board members. If they talk by text, communicate by text. If they talk by email, trying to understand that so that the format that is delivered to you, you're delivering back. And from institutional knowledge, there's so many resources. David explained where he is in his organization, and Boys to Men, we've come a ways. So utilizing video and audio, sometimes people who have been around a long time or have some institutional knowledge, including us as executive directors or founders of a program, we have a hard time typing it, but all the technology is there to just talk it and let someone transcribe it. Might take a little extra money and time, but might be valuable.
No, I think this is so key. I'm trying to think just like of some things that we have done. We do use Google as well. To piggyback off of Warren, the way that our program runs is our facilitators of our girls groups are across multiple sites, And that's one thing our program director says is like, we'll send an email, but some of our facilitators, probably because they work in schools and they're busy, they prefer a quick text. And so she has had to learn, like, these are my facilitators that are gonna respond better via text. Also, just like, where are all the passwords? Like thinking about stuff like, what if something happens? And this is something I had to think about, Bianca. If you fell out today, how do people, I mean, think about it. When you're running an organization, you've probably got like 50 passwords, 50 logins to different things. Where is all of that? Is there at least, 2 people who has access to get into all the things in case something happens? So yeah, Jake just said, what tools are you all using? Feel free to drop some in the chat, please. If there's communication tools, workspace tools, or if you're echoing what we're saying, please drop it in the, because this piece is so important. So I'm gonna move on while y'all are dropping that in the chat. I would say, like, when you're starting up a program or starting up an organization, especially when you're trying to apply for funding, one key piece is being able to capture your impact. Be able to capture the great work that you're doing. And so it can be a little bit of a challenge early on. So tell me a little bit about how you approach evaluation just in a diverse, flexible, and simple way.
Yeah. Before everyone got on and we were talking about karaoke, David said that his karaoke song, one of them is an Ice Cube song. And there's a line in one of Ice Cube's lyrics that says, "Life ain't a track meet, it's a marathon." I live my life by that. I'm going to tell you, life ain't a track meet, it's a marathon. And to me, evaluation is this. We can get to a place, Boys to Men is very guilty of this, where we're going so quick that we forget to pause and reflect. And for growth to happen effectively, we have to slow down. We have to take those moments. So when we look at a program, what are the outputs? Like, what are the things that you want from the program, and why do you want them? Why do you want the program to be that? For us as Boys to Men, we want a safe space for these young men to be able to experience things. So we have to figure out, okay, well, if that's what we want and why we want it is to hopefully give them some self-accountability, how are we going to do that? So for us, one of the main things that we do are debriefs and observation reports after every circle. So not only do we have these big meetings with our staff where we'll talk about things and we'll have big data, maybe we'll have some interview questions that we take to youth at the beginning of the year and the end of the year for them to understand things. But we also just like to have quick little debriefs after we meet with our youth, and then we have an observation report so that anyone who was in that circle has the opportunity to write about it. And we can go back and collect that later to see what needs to change. It allows us to be adaptable and malleable, real time, but it also allows us to look at that. And then looking at impact of data. So for us, again, we're a mentoring organization. When we go for grants, we have to have actual data. So did we help people in what ways? So for us, we look at grades. We look at in-school and out-of-school suspension. We look at tardiness. We kind of look at some of those pieces. We look at the data of where did they come from? What kind of home environment do they live in? Single family household, all that. So we build all of that we build a lot of information into an application that we get from the parents or the guardian so that we have some data coming in. We do it with the school to get data, but then we do this experiential data where we'll go back to parents, we'll go back to mentors, we'll go back to our youth and have them ask questions. What did you think at the beginning of the year to the end of the year? And we value both of those. So hard data, but then that experiential data. What does that look like? And then for me, especially, I come from a sales and marketing background. I come from getting my hand slapped in multiple industries where I ran too quick on these things. So one of the things that I've learned is how do you really do evaluations on your staff, your board, and yourself. Annually, a staff reviews is pretty simple and easy. That's something that can be found. Ongoing, what are those meetings that you're doing and what are you presenting in the meeting? We do a check-in, our name, how we're feeling, and then we allow everybody to drop something in our staff meeting. What's going on? What's handling here? And then course correction, like how are you going to shift things? So for even when I go back to a board matrix and our board, like we have to evaluate what's going on the board. What are they bringing to us? We have to have a document that we talk through certain questions on what we're trying to see. And then we have to be able to course correct. That doesn't mean that the board member gets jettisoned off or that we have to pursue. It's just, what does that look like? So again, slowing down in the midst of the chaos of building a program and just asking some questions. What are my outputs and why? How do I need to debrief these things? What kind of data am I looking for that's hard versus experiential? And how am I going to talk to all these people who are involved? All that communication that David talked about. How do we bring that back? So, I mean, just some feedback from y'all as you're here. You know, how do you evaluate your program right now? How are you evaluating your staff and your impact, your board, and really how do you evaluate yourself and how you're doing this work?
Thank you. I'm going to let people sound off in the chat. I think that's great. One thing we did, which helped to hold us accountable, and it was really simple, was we mapped out all the things we wanted to evaluate. We put like when it's happening, like these months we do this evaluation, or, you know, June is when we do staff evaluation. And then we put who's responsible for collecting those pieces. And we would just send like a calendar invite because it can become a lot. And then I think one thing that we've been doing that's been helpful is like realizing we can't do it all. We have 5 part-time staff and I'm a part-time executive director. So like a year ago, we focused on really gathering and developing this type of evaluation. Now this year we're focusing on developing this type of evaluation. And it's like over the course of a couple of years, you will get into a place where you have it all down. Let's see. Survey all constituents, so staff, teachers, students, mentors with set questions, yes. That's great. Someone said, will the program be made available? Yes, the presentation, Jake will send that out as well. But yes, also someone mentioned constituents, so just getting feedback from everyone around I think is great. So before we get into more of a relaxed panel discussion, we want to at least give you 3 next steps, 3 tangible things that you can go and do. Step 1, create or review your board matrix. That's a great tool because we know that boards should be working with staff or volunteers to really propel that organization or that program. Step 2, build a communication plan. David gave us the layout of like, decide what you need to, how you're going to communicate, who is going to communicate it. Quick story, my son is a participant in Launch for Life. So that's David's program. And I just feel they do an excellent job with communication, specifically with all volunteers. And I noticed that as that organization has grown, different people started communicating. So yeah, build your communication plan. And it doesn't have to be, and I'm talking about internal communications. I'm not talking about external. It doesn't have to be like super difficult. And step 3, interview stakeholders for institutional knowledge archive. This is a really good one. So start building the playbook. If people have specific roles, start building the playbook. I like how Warren said, like you could use videos or recording tools, get yourself together a spreadsheet or something, or lock it down so that these 3 people have access to the grant logins, all these things. So start building that. And it's okay to like say, you know what, we're going to take 1 year. You'll always be building it, but know that you're not going to build it in like a couple months. That's not going to happen. When we started building playbooks for our roles, we took a whole year to do it, to slowly work on it. And we had check-ins for it. Warren, will you walk us through some resources that you've linked in that attendees can use?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a couple of resources that I just found online. These are not the holy grail. They're just tools, right? So the idea here is not take it word for word. It's just taking it a little by little. So a board matrix is here. This is just a composition that talks through how you build that matrix out and gives you an example of how to start that board matrix. I gave a couple of different just assessments, so an employee assessment or just self-assessment checklists for nonprofits, making sure that we kind of know all the priorities that we have that are coming in for a nonprofit. And I'll say on the self-assessment for the nonprofit, you may go through and you may check 30 out of the 50 that are sitting there, and that's okay. It's just to give you a barometer on where you are. For that assessment, and then maybe give you some new ideas on where you want to go next to help prioritize. And then I just gave an example of an observation of a program. I'm sure David, as well myself, I mean, if we're one-to-ones, if people want to talk, ask questions on how we do our particular programs, what tools we actually use, I know I'm more than welcome to talk to anybody about that. So this isn't an observation form that we use. Just like Bianca and David, we use Google Suite as well. So we leverage a lot of forms within there. But this is just, again, just a tool that's there, a resource of a way that you can observe, especially if you're in a setting like ours, which is a mentoring.
Thank you so much, Warren. I noticed that Jeanette in the chat put that the National Mentoring Resource Center has great evaluation tools. Yes, thank you for uplifting that. When we developed our evaluation, we actually used their toolbox to develop our evaluation. They have great scales and just a variety of things that you can choose from. So thank you for putting that. So now we're going to just kind of hop into some casual panel discussion. I have a few questions around just what it's like to really be in that leadership role with organizations that are more grassroots or organizations that have a small amount of staff and that are more community centered. So Warren, you left the sales field, and David, you have a law enforcement background. What has personally been something that is helpful for you and your growth as an executive director?
You want me to go first? You go first. David, you go first. I talk too much.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I think coming from a law enforcement background that's helped me. One is having been an investigator. The attention to the details, right? And being organized is key. And then just communication in general. The other thing that I didn't think was going to help me is when it comes to a fundraising perspective, I'm okay with hearing no, because in law enforcement I got a lot of pushback, right? So as executive director running a nonprofit organization, fundraising is your lifeline, and so being able to hear that no or no thank you is usually what you hear. You got to be okay with that, and you got to sort of push forward and have the resiliency to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think what's been helpful for me is that I have the diversity in my background. When I was in retail, I saw how American Eagle marketed, and that was different than what I had seen when I was in the film industry. So, having different experiences and being okay with trying and failing them, like failing at them, or maybe they just don't work. But I think that diversity really allowed me to come in and go, okay, well, I see how nonprofits that I've seen work. Let me try it how I know how to do it and see if it works or not. And when it didn't work, okay, I learned, and hopefully those were not cost, had a high level of cost to them associated. And so I think that's one of the big pieces there that was there, is just taking the diversity, taking my life experience it and trying.
No, thank you. I think for me, so I taught for 12 years, 5th and 6th grade. Definitely being a former teacher helped, because I knew how schools work. I had those relationships. I will also say that getting a mentor or hanging around other executive directors has been key. So I'm in a group, African American nonprofit leaders, where I'm able to be connected with seasoned executive directors, and just a variety of people who can share ideas, because sometimes when you're in a CEO role or even program management or any leadership role, sometimes you feel a little siloed. You have a lot of thoughts and things. So I definitely would say having some sort of mentorship or network you can connect with that's doing the same thing. So my next question is, what do you all wish that you knew before you grew? Is there anything that you would have done differently from the beginning? So just to give everyone some context, all three of the organizations that we lead have scaled. I know Warren is in multiple schools, probably 20 or 30 schools, Warren. David has multiple cohorts, and Pretty Purpose, we're at 16 different school sites. So I want to know, before all of this happened, what do you all wish that you knew before you grew and scaled?
Yeah, we're fortunate. We started with one youth, and we're now in 8 school divisions. We run 39 weekly circles. We're at 32 different schools. So we've grown a lot, and most of that growth has been in the last 3 to 4 years post COVID. I think one thing that I wish we would have known before we grew is it's okay to ask for money. We go to schools, and for a good portion of time, we did not ask for money. We didn't ask for buy-in. And then we just started asking for buy-in. We had a number that it cost us to facilitate and run a circle, and not every school can afford that, but they can at least put a little bit of financial buy-in. So that's something that, if we could have done that a little bit better, that could have been there. And I think something that's helped us recently that we could have done better at the beginning is getting out to service clubs, the Rortons and the Rotaries, and there are a lot of different clubs with a lot of different people, and just making ourselves available and letting people know what that looks like. Including for us, we started going to the chambers. So I saw someone asked about corporate sponsorships. We joined a couple of chambers. It cost a little bit of money, cost a little bit of time, but we were able to find 2 to 3 strong corporate sponsors that have been with us, that helped us get things that were hard to get. It's hard to say, hey, our kids love hoodies. It's a tribal thing. They want to be a part of a tribe. We love hoodies, but all of a sudden a corporate sponsor got it, but we had to go to a chamber meeting. We had to make ourselves available for that.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a couple things that come to mind of I wish I knew, or I wish I would have done. One of them is which you guys talked about previously in your previous discussion, is the development of a logic model. I think the logic model really informs you as the executive director and as the board where you want to go with the organization, what your priorities are. I think it's extremely important. And we just developed that in the last year. I wish we would have done that sooner, because it would have guided us a little bit better, and we probably would have had some less growing pains. The second thing is around evaluation, because as Warren points out, you have to ask for money, and oftentimes the evaluation of your program can speak to what you're doing. Right? When I was pretty naive early on, thinking that, oh, this mission is fantastic, everybody's going to jump in and just throw money at me all day long. That's not the case, right? They especially larger corporations, they have specific things that they can give money towards. they have requirements that that will allow them to give money to you for. So having a proper evaluation, I think is helpful because it can show the impact of your program when you're looking for fundraising or finances. The third thing I would say is understanding, and I saw a little comment in here about accountability, right? That actions speak louder than words, right? Early on, there was a lot of people that told me they were going to do a lot of things for me, and probably 10% of that happened, right? And understanding that on the front end would have been helpful for me in sort of my own personal disappointment, right? Like, oh, what did I do to not get that action to happen? I actually, when people tell me when they tell me they're gonna do something, my response is, I love what you're saying. I can't wait till you do it. I repeat that because it's so important, because there's a lot of people have good intentions, right? They have good aspirations, especially when they're connected to the mission. But as we all know with volunteer work, life happens, and they forget, or they don't have time, and then we're left holding the bag. So it's important to really, when you're talking to somebody, even if they're selling you the world, really confirm to them you're waiting for them to take action, that the words are not enough.
No, thank you. We've got a lot of questions, and you all, once we wrap up our panel discussion, we're definitely going to get to these questions. These are great. So I will say that one thing about corporate sponsorship is to find somebody who works within that corporation. Start out with maybe engaging employees with matching dollars. Also, a lot of corporations are looking for a volunteer component, like they have these volunteer hours or volunteer days. I can say that every single corporation that we've gotten sponsorship or just dollars from, they usually wanted to engage with us through some sort of volunteerism, whether it's like, they're like, hey, can we come pack the hygiene bags for you all, or something? They have these programs. So that could be a great way to connect with corporations, is giving them a lot of options that aligns with, like the work that they're doing. So my next question is, I know that both of you engage with Mentor Virginia pretty consistently. Warren, I know I've had you as a client. David, I know you engage with Mentor Virginia. And I know that even though I'm a consultant, we also get TA from Mentor Virginia. So how do you effectively use the affiliate to support the work that you do?
We used the technical assistance program twice, and that was really, really helpful. One was for we wanted to really unpack what DEI meant, because there's a lot of noise around it. So we wanted clarity, and Mentor Virginia helped us kind of understand those words and really what they mean for our board. And then we did a board matrix as well. We go to the National Mentoring Summit as a part of Mentor Virginia. We're engaged in the legislative process. I think that's something that's really important, to leverage that as a way to use it. They give you access to legislators, so that's important. And at least Mentor Virginia does a great job of having like coffee conversations and such. So I don't always go. I encourage our staff. I encourage our student interns, like just letting other people get exposure to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with Mentor since really the development of our organization. We use them to help develop our organization properly before we even launched it. We've also used them for evaluation. We also have utilized them through Capitol Hill Day, where in our ambassador program, we actually bring our high school mentees with us to Capitol Hill Day as advocates for that, and it's a really great experience for them, and Mentor Virginia and overall Mentor have been gracious to allow them to attend, and actually two of our mentees spoke at the training day at Capitol Hill Day, which was a great experience for them and a great experience for us. Yeah, they're a fantastic organization that we've been using before even the launch of the organization.
Great. And I see Jake just dropped in the chat where you all can sign up to see where your affiliate is. I know just from being a TA, I want to give you all some tips. Anything that you are thinking about developing, typically your affiliate has some sort of draft or template for it. We literally have a tool bank with hundreds of resources in it. So that's a great way to tap into your affiliate. Additionally, when our organization utilizes the technical assistance, we will pick one thing that we want to do and do it really well. Because those hours get used up really fast. So I know one thing we used them for was to redevelop our program evaluation, and it went really well that we were focusing on that one thing. So my next question is, I know that both of you do a lot of fundraising. David, it seems like you all do a lot of grassroots fundraising with like individual donors. And Warren, your organization has grown to 4 full-time staff. So what is your approach to obtaining, leveraging, and retaining those resources so that your organizations can be sustainable?
Yeah, so we are very grassroots. We only get a couple grants, and so it's really important. Number one, get connected board members. That is so very important, and I didn't realize that early on, that it's important for your board members to have connections and have people. I'm fortunate to have a president who does this stuff really, really well. He's very connected in the community. He has a great ability to get funding for us. I have another individual who runs our graduate program, who's connected, who is able to tap into his resources as well. But number one, have board members with connections. Number two, and I mentioned this early on when recruiting volunteers, but also when you're trying to fundraise, is connection to the mission, right? There's a gazillion nonprofits out there and this is another naivety that I had, is I didn't realize how cutthroat competitive nonprofit organizations were. So, understand that, and understand that you are in a competitive market, right? And that companies and individuals only have so much money to donate, especially now. Donations to nonprofits have gone down, right? So it's important that you connect them to the mission, you tell a story that they can connect to and that they're willing to support.
I think for us, it's trying to stay small and let the seams burst. It's easy when a program is successful to want to go everywhere. So like we have a statement that's traction over promotion. We didn't obviously set that up. That comes from recovery communities, but that attraction over promotion kind of idea of, we want buy-in from somewhere else. And we may tell people, yes, we want to be there, but we're not ready. And we just have to trust the process that they'll be willing. There are always, I have to remind us a lot, and myself a lot, like there will always be youth to serve. The worst thing we can do is abandon the youth. That's the worst thing we can do. So sometimes it means we can't get to all the places that need us because either there's not buy-in from the other side, or we don't have the resource to get there. So work within what it is. So for us, there was one county that we had a lot of buy-in. And this was a crazy stat that I just saw yesterday for us that's not public, but I guess I'm making it public, that we were like 70% in one county and we're like 48% now. That's a big shift. And it's because like we stayed there for a long time. And because we stayed there, we didn't just get like county support, but we got school support. We got corporate support. We got the fundraisers, the regional funders from that area. We got the other nonprofits to buy in and be partners. Like, we stayed small in one area and we got latched to everything, and we figured it out there. And then that allowed us to try to go to the next place and do the same thing. And so having that idea of like, what comes first? If we're going to grow, is it money? Is it mentor? Is it a board member buy-in? What is the piece that we need to go? And if it's not there, gosh, we want to be there so bad, but we're not ready. So we're just going to have to say no or not yet, and then come back to where we can grow and say, what else can we root? Where can we root? Because if we can root really, really good there, we're gonna stay for a longer time, and we're gonna be able to branch out effectively.
Yeah, y'all just gave us the playbook. You just gave us the playbook. No, I love it. What you're saying is golden. I've had those same experiences. So my last question before we get into the Q&A, and we've got a lot of questions, is how do grassroots leaders set boundaries for themselves within the nonprofit space, specifically when balancing multiple roles? So, Warren, you all have major growth, but you only have 4 staff. David, y'all have had major growth, but you're still working as an all-volunteer organization. You're still working. I'm a part-time executive director. I believe I'll be full-time soon, but right now I'm balancing my consulting work. How do we set these boundaries? We know executive directors have a lot on our plate. So give us some advice, because I'm gonna be honest, y'all, Bianca has no advice. I struggle with it. So how do y'all do it?
For me, I turn off I don't answer the phone sometimes when people call me, and I'll be honest with them later about it. Sometimes I'll set a phone call. I have very passionate board members, and I'm so grateful that they're passionate. But sometimes I'll get 7 emails in 7 minutes about 7 different things, and I'll go back and say, hey, why don't we, and I'll set the time that's good for me. Are you available on these 2 or 3 days at this time? And can we sit down and talk about all of this at once? And then when we're done talking about it, I hang up and I go take a walk, because that's a lot of information to digest. So I think it's just, I've realized for me, and again, I've come from a lot of different experience, that I just have to slow down sometimes. And it's not that it's not going to get done. It just doesn't have to get done yet. The same way that I don't have to grow yet, I don't have to get everything done right now. It can get done. I have to organize myself first. And even though we're a larger organization than Bianca and David, in some aspects, like, I still wear multiple hats. And so my mindset is I have to like put a lot in the calendar. So my calendar is full. If it's not in the calendar, it's not going to get done. And that's like sending an email to somebody. That's like making a phone call. Like, if I do not put it in my calendar, I will forget. So I block off time. Like, if I'm going to work on grants, I block off 5 hours. I put my phone somewhere else and I'll work on it. And if something is an emergency, then hopefully if I follow David's plan of communication, I'm not the only person being called. Somebody else can handle it for a minute and I'll come back to it.
No, that's great. I will say that I block off time, and that has helped. Like, I try to do 1 day a week where I have no meetings. Like, I don't take any meetings, because how else am I going to actually get the work done that I need to get done, like writing grants or just those operational things. All right, so David, give us your advice.
Well, if you ask my very supportive wife, she probably says I haven't had figured out boundaries just yet. But I have learned quite a bit over the last 3 years on how to set boundaries, not just organizationally, right, but with the population we serve. So organizationally, I work a full-time job. So being an executive director is sort of my side hobby, right? But it's also my passion. So how do I balance working a full-time job, having a family, and being an executive director for a very growing organization? And it's difficult. And one of the things is, as Warren points out, is knowing when I need to respond and when it can wait for later. The other aspect to that is trusting the people that you have put in place, that they're going to take care of the things that they say they're going to take care of, and letting it go. Early on, when you're a founder of an organization, like it's your baby, like, and you want to control everything, right? And it consumes you. So it's important that as you get the right people in the right place, that you let go of that, so it doesn't consume you anymore, and you trust the people that you put in place. The last thing I would say is more about the population we serve and the boundaries around that. I mean, I think we all go into a nonprofit space wanting to help, and you can get in like this weird space where you want to save, and it can, and especially early on, and that's not the space we're in. We can't save. We have to support, and that's our role. And we have to understand that early on, because that can consume you, and it did. I got too involved with too many of the mentees early on. I'm not only my executive director, but I'm also a mentor. So understanding what your role is in this nonprofit space, and understanding they're not here to save people, they're here to support people.
Thank you so much. Well, we're gonna move to the Q&A. We have lots of questions, so I'm just gonna start with the Q&A chat, and then I'll move over to the other chat. How do you deal with or work with the concept of accountability, making agreements, and having people do what they said they would do? This is definitely a good question, especially when working with volunteers. I know for us, when we're working with other organizations, we develop like MOUs, which can be helpful, but would love to hear from Warren and David about, just in general.
Yeah, so what's difficult when you don't have hired employees is, and you're not paying them, you don't have a carrot or a stick. So you're sort of stuck in between here. And again, I go back to mission, but when you, as it relates to accountability, one, with the board, we have a board expectations document that they have to sign every year, that says, hey, I'm willing to do this amount of, go to this amount of events to volunteer. I'm willing to provide this amount of money for you. I'm willing to contact this amount of fundraisers or donors. So having a board expectations document for them to sign with your volunteers and for us, our mentors, I go back to the mission. Hey, the kids are relying on you. The kids are relying on you. It may be a guilt trip, but hey, we are here for the kids. You're not here for me. You're not volunteering for David. You're volunteering for the kids that we serve, and they're relying on you. And you can't drop the ball. So I go back to the mission.
I'd say here to what they said. So separately, different, I guess. We have a staff meeting, so that's a big piece of accountability. The debriefs after anything that we do programmatic, we debrief whoever was involved. It doesn't, if you're a mentor, a board member, once we're in a space for us of a circle, we're all the same. So all those people who are adults in the room have to debrief immediately. So that way we can hold accountable what just happened. And we can also dust our feet kind of from boundaries. We can dust our feet to what David said, we can't save them. So let's just know that we can check in on that next week. And I'd say for our program accountability, it's all the data tools, all the things that we do. When we go back and ask questions to the school, we have a school liaison where we go. So since we're in schools, we want to make sure that we have somebody there. So it's just always making sure that there's some kind of check and balance to that, and just having the conversations real time. So accountability for me, I can't wait a year and hold someone accountable. We have to work on it, piece by piece as we go.
Thank you. So this question, how do you track action items across the organization? Do you use some sort of dashboard? So I know there's all these workspace tools people use. We really love Google. Every week we have a staff meeting. My team looks like I'm executive director. We have 2 program directors, and then we have an operations manager, and we have someone that does our communications. And at the bottom of the staff meeting notes, we have this built-in task tracker list. And even if you missed that meeting, you are responsible for looking at that list to see what it is that you have to do. And we just check off the list. So that's kind of how, you know, we do, and it's been pretty effective. Warren, David, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, for action items and how to keep things accountable. Yeah. I saw this from my wife. I do a lot of one-to-ones. So we have our big staff meeting, but I'll even if it's just a phone call, it's a set schedule where with each of my staff, I do that with certain board members that are kind of like, finance chair, board chair. Those one-to-ones are a way for me to kind of help with the action items. And to David's point earlier, like getting out of the way and letting people who say they're going to do something kind of do it. And then just, again, checking in on those pieces. And if they drop the ball, okay, then they drop the ball,
Yeah.
it's not brain surgery, it's not life or death. And a lot of times, sometimes it is, but for the most part, we can kind of self-correct as we go.
Yeah, I echo that. I think to Warren's point, being flexible, for those balls that are dropped, but having a spreadsheet and you can easily sort of track do outs that way. But not much more to add on what we do than what Warren and Bianca already said.
I agree. Those one-to-ones are good. We do one-to-ones too, or I do them with each one of our staff members. Some are weekly, like my operations person, because she works so closely with me. And then some are more like bi-weekly. Board members are a little more sparse. So next question. Does your organization have specific strategies to recruit male mentors? This is a current challenge that we have in our organization.
I love this question because if somebody develops the right solution for this, they'll probably be pretty popular. Male mentors are really difficult to find. And that's across the board. I mean, if you go to the Mentor Summit and you speak with any mentoring program that recruits males, they say the same thing. For us, specifically, because we have been quite successful at it, is one, being grassroots, right? Pound the pavement, knock on doors, go to sports organizations. Both my kids play sports. I'm constantly, recruiting coaches. I mean, what better place to find mentors than coaches? But also, now that we have a cadre of male mentors, I require them to give me 3 suggestions for mentors that I can call and I could talk to them about our program. So once you get mentors, have them be your recruiters. And then the last thing I'll say is men in particular that I've dealt with that are wanting to mentor, oftentimes they don't because out of the fear of the unknown. Are they going to be good at at mentoring? What do they do? What is required? Do they have the time? So that's why your mentors are now great recruiters, because they've been through the process and they can ease some of those fears for the ones they're recruiting.
For us, we try to get them into the experience. So can we get them to a circle? Can we invite them to where the youth are and get their buy-in? Our whole program is built on buy-in. So we want that. And then to David's point, I mean, again, Roriton clubs, Rotaries, there's a lot of male organizations, 1,000 Black Men. There's tons of organizations out there that it's just getting in front and saying who you are and continuing to do that. We go back to service clubs. We go back to the same place and kind of draw from the well over and over. The hope, but it's what brings men in and keeps them is they experience it. And when they see it, it's hard to walk away from it when you see the impact of a program, and you get validated. I think men sometimes we can act like we don't need that validation. But man, like it feels good when a kid who you just met says, wow, like your story really impacted me. And you're like, what? To David's point, I'm afraid, like I have nothing to give. Kids just want you to show up. They want structure, they want consistency. So that's what we tell men. Show up. We're not asking you to do much. Just show up. Just be there, and that sometimes can help. I did see the background check question. I'll just say, like for us, we put it in some of our budgeting, and we ask for that. So we just kind of tuck it in, and we use Sterling ourselves for volunteers.
Thank you. We use Sterling as well. $90, that's a lot of money in Florida. It does not cost us that much when we do it through Sterling. Next question, what are some tips you would recommend around starting and staying small while navigating funders who want to see big numbers in terms of impact? This is a really good question. So I would say really tap into the community. A lot of those funders that you're speaking of that want to see big numbers, that's going to be grant funders, or like that's probably what you're referring to. Would love to hear you all's thoughts around this, but tapping into the community for sponsorships, individual donors, I think is key. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we rely so heavily on the community, and I wouldn't focus like solely on monetary donation. We get a lot of in-kind donation, especially from the restaurant industry. They have been so gracious to us in the Richmond area, and we relied heavily on them for cash donation, but also food donation as well. And so there's always people within your community that if what you're selling is, I'm trying to better this community, and they're always going to respond to that. And it's really important. So yeah, I mean, I have not let organizations drive my growth, because there's always somebody I can go get a donation from that's not going to require me to grow beyond my capabilities.
I mean, Jake, this is a whole different webinar. I mean, I could talk about this. I mean, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, to be honest. I have to be careful to be short-winded. I stepped away from us going after national grants, whether that was good or bad. We only apply for a few national grants. We look regional. If whoever asked the question is in a place that's more rural, I would be happy to sit down with you and go through Google and just start Googling a bunch of words to try to figure out what that looks like. But for me, the regional support on a grant side helps understand the growth. Like they understand what growth means because they understand the community, they're in it. So that's what we did. Like we were having a hard time going after bigger grants because they were asking these huge questions. And I was like, we're too small an organization. Like even as big as we are considerable, like we're tiny. So like we went regional and we went hyper regional. Who helps in Richmond City? Who helps in whatever community? And we leverage those kind of tools. Again, I could go on I'm going to shut up, but I could go for an hour on this one, Jake.
Well, I mean, this segues into the next question about grants. I will say we've had some national funding, but it's always funders who are aligned with what we do. So when I say that, what I mean is, like Warren is saying, sometimes it's like, don't even waste your time on certain opportunities. Really zone in on those funders who are aligned. So for example, we will look for philanthropic organizations that are hyper-focused on Black and Brown girls, community-centered organizations. They specifically say, we're not looking to fund a big organization. We're looking to fund startups. We're looking to fund the ones where the founder is now the executive director. We target those because it's a good match. And so we've been successful with that. So sometimes you just gotta, those who really align with what you do. Next question, how to find grants and write grants. So I will tell you, I'm like a self-taught grant writer. Really taught myself how to do it by looking at other people's grants, going to workshops that were within the community. Typically, your local community foundation might offer some sort of professional development when it comes to grant writing. There's all sorts of courses out there. We use a platform called Instrumental, but there's so many different platforms like Grant Watch, Foundation Directory, where you can look up grants. Sometimes you can just type it into Google. You can also connect with other people who are doing similar work to see what type of grants they're applying for. That's more on a regional level. But if you're really looking for grants on a national level, sometimes these, different platforms could help. I would also say look into like local funding. We just recently got some local funding that we kind of felt like this is out of our scope to get, but hey, we're going to go for it. It was like HUD funding, and they have a small allocation that they use for public services. So I would say those are some of my tips.
Man, this is such a good question. Counties, school boards, boards of supervisors, all give money. From what I did when I first got in this position is I went to nonprofits' websites, looked for their annual reports, looked at who gave them money, and then researched those organizations. Dirtball way of doing it. I'm sorry, but I did it.
It's not
Kennedy
dirtball.
Foundation,
Everybody does that.
United Way, can help. All of those things for finding grants. The other thing I would say for finding grants, real quick, is informational interviews. Like if you for writing grants, like look up grant writers and don't ask them to be your grant writer. Just ask them for an informational interview. I just have questions and I want to ask. They may buy into your organization and give you a really good rate and do a great grants for you. They might do a one-off grant for you. They may give you templates. But for me, it's a very underutilized tool, I think, of just asking people to talk about themselves. Informational interview. Just talk about yourself, and who knows what the buy-in will be. And then I'm going to go to what David talked about with institutional knowledge. Whoever has the most information about your organization, they don't have to write the grant, but they need to just talk to you. If that's you, then you need to write it down. But if it's other people, board members and such, just getting information is a way to help write the grant, because I write a lot of our grants, and we do have a part-time grant writer, so she writes a lot, but it's a back and forth game, but it's trying to think. And the more that I'm invested, the better I can get at writing the grant. And the more that the people who know about the grants or know about our organization, the more I use their words in the grant.
From a small organization like ours, we don't really, because we don't have the resources, we sort of push ourselves away from grants right now, because it does take a lot of time to look for, and it takes a lot of time to write, and you may or may not get it. So we had to understand that early on and say, all right, how do we want to expend our resources? And we've been very successful in sort of that grassroots fundraising area. But once we grow and we start to hire employees, we'll get into more of that grant area.
Really want to elevate what David said, because the grants can be a lot of work, like with reports that are due. So someone asked about Instrumental. I put the name in the chat. Instrumental is kind of expensive. What we do is we subscribe to it and then we pause it. We pause the monthly subscription because it is kind of expensive, but it's been helpful for us. Next question, what do you do as a consultant? I don't know if that question is for me. At Mentor Virginia, I do this. I help people build their programs, give them tools, help them draft templates. I do coaching. This is what I do. The same way we're sitting here talking is what I do. What do you use for your CRM for all groups of people? We use MailChimp to communicate marketing, and we use Little Green Light for our donor base. Warren and David, I don't know if it's anything else that you all use.
Regrettably, we use Constant Contact. I wish we were in MailChimp. But we use Bloomerang for our CRM. We use IMS, Integrated Mentoring Software. I might say that wrong, but IMS is a great tool for getting mentors, and all of our youth are kind of through there. So, and I'm happy, again, anybody who has questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll give you any tool we use.
Yeah, I mean, we're solely in Google Suites at the moment. And since we're such a small organization, we don't really use MailChimp or anything else at the moment.
Would it be okay to write in using grant money to buy hygiene kits? Yes. When we do the hygiene lessons with our girls, they each get a hygiene kit, and we've had that as a part of grant funding. Corporations love stuff like that. I will tell you, because they want to do these one-day volunteering things. So I will tell you that's a hit with corporations. How do you approach juvenile justice systems to implement your program as an alternative to detention? David, do you want to
Yeah,
chat about that?
we work directly with Chesterfield County Juvenile Detention Center, and they actually incorporate their sort of programs, their their sort of education programs with us. So they will start in our mentoring program while they're still in juvenile detention. It'll be part of their release program to get out of probation. So it's a good way for them to reacclimate into the environment that they came from, which is often the reason why they're getting into trouble in the first place, is their environment. So it gives them an outlet. It gives them continual support outside of juvenile detention. We have not worked with them to prevent detention yet, but this is more for when they are in and get out.
No, we're running low on time. We stay connected to judges the best we can as well. We want to make sure that one of the things we can do is just let the judges know that we're available. And Commonwealth attorneys, anyone like that, we want to make sure that they know. So hopefully we're getting there before the justice system.
Someone said, can you talk more about your ambassador program? Our girl ambassadors, they do speaking engagements, social media. They also do community outreach. Like recently, they just spoke to the city of Petersburg to advocate for funding for our program. I'm like, why do I need to get up here and talk? Let's let the girls chat and tell you about, why a small organization like us should have funding. And they're gonna we're really scaling that work, and so our ambassadors will receive a stipend, but we chose girls who were in our program for multiple years who have aged out to be our ambassadors. I'll hand it off to David or Warren.
Yeah, our ambassador program it's actually the first year we've had it this year, so it's definitely growing and evolving. But we do volunteerism as well. We send them to the Mentor Summit or the Capitol Hill Day. We also help them, try to prep for post high school, either whether it's college or employment or whatever. The last thing is we're going to be launching a leadership academy within our ambassador program that the mentees can apply for and have separate leadership education and opportunities in our program.
Feel very free to reach out to me after. I know we're short on time, so I can say that talk later.
Oh, Bianca, you're on mute. Sorry, Bianca, were you saying something? You were on mute. Oh, you're still on mute.
I'm
There we
so
go.
sorry. I
No,
feel
you're
like
good.
there was a lot of questions. I'm not sure if there's an opportunity for our next community of practice to kind of center what has been discussed today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first, thank you everybody for all the amazing questions. Thank you so much to our panelists for answering. You guys really killed it in that last 15-20 minutes, getting so many questions in. But as Bianca said, we do have another opportunity after this for you to come and ask questions, talk through some of the things we spoke about today. Very quickly, I'll go over some additional resources. Again, as always, you can email us with any questions or feedback at this email, collaborativewebinarseries@mentoring.org. I pasted this in the chat, but you can also click this link here to find a mentor affiliate that's local to you. They can, again, support with so many different things as we heard about in this conversation. The Mentoring Connector is a really amazing resource to help you recruit mentors. I use it for my own mentoring program that I run, and we get a lot of mentors through this. People go on there, type in their zip code, type in the type of program they're looking for, and they get connected with mentoring programs across the country. And then the National Mentoring Resource Center, which is funded by OJDP, is again one of the resources we were mentioning where you can receive no-cost training and technical assistance. Again, please remember to take the survey that'll pop up on your screens when we end this webinar. Just 3 to 4 minutes. It's anonymous to let us know how we did, see what we can improve on. And again, huge plug for this community of practice. This link will be shared out as well with all the materials. But I encourage you to come to this if you did have questions that we weren't able to answer today. This will all be sent out next week with the recording and resources that we mentioned as well. And last but not least, join us next month. Next month's webinar will be a part of our wellness series, Beyond Stereotypes, Defying the Lie of Who Gets to Be Well. You can, again, register here or at our website. But huge thank you to our panelists and to Bianca for facilitating and putting together this webinar. This was such an amazing conversation, so much actionable and practical information that folks can take away. So again, thank you to you all, but also thanks to everybody in the audience today for joining. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.